Hi guys, it's Shane Wellman. I hope you've enjoyed the first couple videos of this series on perfecting mixes using the 3 T's approach. We've covered a lot of material in a short amount of time, and in this video we're going to finish our mix by fixing up the vocals. If there was ever a track that defined a recording, it would be the main vocals. That is to say, you can't usually have a professional sounding mix without having professional sounding vocals. It's a dead giveaway. So to the beginner, vocals can be a scary thing, but mixing vocals can also be pretty simple once we utilize the 3 T's approach: timing, tuning, and tone. With most other instruments, we attacked timing first. And sometimes with vocals, we want to do that too. But most of the time, our vocal tracks don't usually follow a super strict timing pattern like most other instruments do. They tend to be a little bit more flowing. So for the most part, I think we should be able to fix a lot of the timing and tuning at the same time. So what I did to start with was construct as good of a take as I could by, like we did with the other instruments, copying and pasting good audio and replacing bad sections of the track. So now I'm going to start by working with as good of a vocal track as possible. And by doing what I did, copying and pasting, we've already fixed a large number of the tuning and timing issues just by correcting mistakes. But I already did that because there's no reason to show you all of that again. We have other stuff to talk about. Like I said, timing and tuning of the vocals can usually be addressed in the same step. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter the audio editor of the track, and in Cubase I do this by double-clicking. And now I can analyze the audio for pitch. This software is similar in a lot of ways to other pitch correcting software like Antares Auto-Tune, other graphic editor plugins. It does work differently than a live style pitch corrector though. But once again, if you want to learn more about live style pitch correctors or plugins or how to use pitch correction software efficiently, check out the Elite Audio Recording course from wellmanaudio.com. It's also available, like we said before in the other videos, on the iOS and Mac App Store, or you can grab your free version of the course from the iOS App Store. Anyways, after my audio has been analyzed, I can see that it detected or tried to detect all the notes that were being sung. This mic track does have a bit of bleed on it since it's a live recording, so you can see that some of the pitch is doing weird things, but overall it should still be tunable. I like to start by kind of globally getting the setting as close as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quantize all of the pitch by selecting all the audio and then quantizing. And what I'm doing here, this will pull the sung notes to the nearest note on the grid. And next, I'm going to straighten the pitch as much as I think I can get away with and still sound natural. And the straightening pitch is going to help iron out the fluctuations in pitch within each note. Okay, so this is going to give me a good starting point, but no doubt there's going to be a lot of mistakes and weird things going on. But from here, I can manually move the notes, or I can tweak the quantizing or the pitch straightening of each note if needed. So I'm just going to go through the entire song and I'm going to tweak it the best that I can. And if for some reason I run into a couple notes that just absolutely are not working, I can always delete the pitch correction from those notes completely and just leave that part natural. If you want more tips and tricks on how to get your pitch correction right every time, we cover it in great detail in the audio course. But along with the tuning of the track, at the same time I can warp these, I guess you would call them pitch events or MIDI events. If I select this tab here, editing these notes will not affect the pitch anymore, but will actually warp the track audio behind it. And this is a quick way to edit timing while we're already closely auditioning audio and tuning it anyway. Yeah, sure, we could enter the warp part of this editor and create warp tabs and do some serious time stretching like we did with the other instruments. But usually what we are doing right here is enough to fix up vocals because they're somewhat flowing anyway. Okay, so now the timing and the tuning part of vocals are done. Here's a quick listen.
From the valley low, in the darkest place, to to the highest heights, mountain face, and the rhythm.
So timing and tuning are done, but you'll notice the mix of the voice, the tone still sounds terrible. But that's okay, we're making progress. Now it's time to tackle the third part of the 3 T's. Tone. Usually with instrument recording, I'm a fan of achieving the best instrument sounds to begin with, so that we have to edit things as little as possible in post-production. I'm not usually a fan of over-EQing or over-processing, because usually things like that are done to try to cover up for something. But with vocal recording, there's not always a lot you can do ahead of time to prepare the instrument. Almost all of this happens in the mix. So all of that to say that the vocals will be one of the most heavily mixed tracks in your recording. Why? Well, because it always has to be clearly heard over top of all the other instruments and loud things that are going on. So the tone part of the vocals needs a little help. But since we mentioned preparing our vocal instrument, I'm going to take this opportunity to share an incredible resource for those of you who want to learn how to achieve the best possible vocal performances. You need to check out Brett Manning's Singing Success program. You can get there by going to wellmanaudio.com and clicking the Singing Success widget at the bottom of one of the pages. Brett Manning is a tremendous vocal coach who's been helping people all over the world achieve greatness with their voices. He's the guy training, or has trained, a lot of award-winning artists. Anyway, he's produced a vocal training program called Singing Success, and it's definitely a must-have for serious artists. But anyway, back to vocal mixing. Because tone always has to be clearly heard amongst all the other instruments and loud things going on, it can be a little tricky to mix, which is why we actually devote 2 entire video lessons of the Elite Audio Recording course to vocal recording. But essentially it comes down to this. 1, we need to strictly control the frequencies, and this is so that vocals are clearly heard against all the other instruments, and I'm going to show you how to do this. And 2, we need to control the dynamics of the track. And this is so that the volume is even and doesn't get too quiet at certain times or too loud other times. If you achieve these 2 things, along with the timing and tuning control that you did earlier, it's all going to combine to make a vocal track with great tone in the mix. Notice how I said in the mix. That's because tone is sometimes subjective, especially with the vocals. And let me give you a for instance. Most of the time, some people, especially beginners, associate bass with power. It's because to most people, the way they achieve power is by adding low frequencies. But this type of vocal mix could be dreadful in a song scenario. So here is part of the key to good vocal mixes. In vocals and certain other instruments, lows do not equal power. Lows equals mud. Let the power come from controlled dynamics and from clarity. The last thing we want to do is to crank out a bunch of lows on our main vocals. Not only will this rob the clarity from the track itself, it's going to muddy up the entire mix by stomping on all the instruments that actually should be playing in the bass range. So we need to strictly control these frequencies. So in my EQ setting, I'm going to roll off the lows, so the sub-frequencies are going to be pretty much gone, and the low mids are going to be reduced. If you want to learn more about frequencies and frequency ranges, like I said several times before in this series, grab the audio course. This is another area that we cover quite a bit. Once you get the lows controlled, you may find, especially if you're using a good microphone, is that I don't need a lot of extra adjustments to get the EQ right. It may only need a little bit more tweaking, like maybe I need to nudge the highs up or down, depending on the singer or whatever. It just depends on the situation. But not much more is needed. And notice how I'm even EQing with peaks and shelves. I don't need any seriously fancy EQ to get this done. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, in live mixes especially, the sound guys say something like, "The vocals won't stand out right in the mix because I don't have enough EQ settings on my equalizer." And yeah, sometimes that may be true, but more often than not, I find myself biting my tongue because the real reason they can't get the vocals to stand out right in the mix is because they're missing the second part of our clarity, which comes from dynamics control. And as a result, they're trying to use an equalizer to make things cut through the mix when what they should be doing is controlling dynamics. Which sets us up for our next step in vocal mixing, dynamics. If you remember back to our last video where I described how dimension directly affects tone. Remember, this is why we ended up artificially stereo imaging the guitars, because when the dimension was bad, the tone of the entire mix suffered. Well, there is another factor, like dimension, that can arguably affect tone. This is called dynamics, or expression. Sure, it can be argued that tone, dynamics, dimension, and all these other things are separate categories and independent of each other, but most of the time people don't think that way, especially beginners. So I think the best way to describe it is this. We have our main category, tone. But tone also has the things that it is made up of, like dimension, dynamics, and frequency settings. We have talked about the other things like the dimension and the frequencies already with the other instruments, but we never really described dynamics. This is because we've previously been working with instruments like electric guitars that were amped, which are usually pretty compressed to begin with. And we replaced our drums with samples, so compression isn't extremely necessary there either for dynamics control, because we can just manipulate our drum samples directly. But now on vocals, the need for dynamics control becomes quite evident. The voice fluctuates a lot. Dynamics can also be labeled expression. In recording, dynamics processors are the things that control expression. These are the things like compressors, gates, expanders, and limiters. With the vocals, we need to limit the amount the volume actually fluctuates between the softs and the louds of the voice. And I'm sure some of you have already ran into this. If the voice gets too soft, it will get lost in the mix. And if it's sporadic and has loud spikes, it's going to jump out of the mix and sound very uncontrolled. So the heavy hitters we need to mix the vocals are a compressor, and this is to reduce the differences between the louds and the softs. The compressor will do most of the work to even out the voice, but I will also add a limiter after the compressor, and this is to control any spikes that might get through my compressor setting. Yeah, sure, I could probably set my compressor to take care of leveling and controlling all of the spikes all in one device, but I really do not want to hear my compressor working. And with the tools that I have to work with, I find it better to use a more RMS-favored compression on the voice, because to me that seems to give a more natural, realistic sound, but it can let some of the quick spikes get through. So I'm going to follow that up with some sort of limiter. If all this dynamic stuff seems a little fuzzy to you, I'm not surprised. Everyone talks about things like equalizers, but compressors and limiters are probably something you don't hear about every day. So I'm going to suggest that you study up on the terminology and how these things work, because dynamics tools are probably some of the most important tools you have to work with. If you want to learn more about these things, like I said before, make sure you get your hands on the Elite Audio Recording course somehow. And here are the results.
I could search the world just to lose my way. I could find my hope on a happy day. But my greatest joy and my only aim is to love you.
The last thing I want to do to the voice is to construct a little bit more dimension to finalize the tone. And this is supposed to be a live recording, so I want to make the room qualities pretty lively on the track by either adding some delay or some reverb. I want it to sound live, like popular church recordings usually do. Now listen.
I could search the world just to lose my way. I could find my hope on a happy day. But my greatest joy.
Now hopefully you have a clear picture of how to fix the main vocals. So let's recap. For timing and tuning, well, the first two T's of our list, we pitch corrected and we time stretched, pretty much all in the same step. For the tone part, the last step on our list, we EQ'd, we controlled the dynamics, and we constructed some more dimension using effects. Mostly, this same process applies to background vocals. But I'm going to add an extra step to the background vocals, because I want them to add fullness to the mix without taking away from the main vocals in the mix's stereo landscape, so to speak. An easy way to do this is to widen them out of the way of the main vocals using the same technique as before. We're going to create an artificial stereo image like we did with the guitars. Remember, we duplicated and isolated them, one panned all the way left, one panned all the way right, and then we offset the timing a little bit. Now, if you had enough repeats of each section of the song, you could also stack performances, meaning that you could create the illusion that the singer actually sang the part twice by, say, playing the vocals from chorus 1 and chorus 2 all at the same time, or whichever part it may be. If we were tracking the song in the studio, we could just have the singer sing the part twice, but under certain circumstances, we can also achieve the same results with audio clips from the same track. But it really depends on the situation. It's just something you're going to have to try. So for me, whichever way that I could, I went through and I stereo imaged the background vocals. And here is the final mix.
In the rhythm of every night and day, where there is no love, will you be my love? Yeah, yeah. I can't find anyone like you that satisfies quite like you do.
In case you forgot, here's what the entire song started out sounding like. And now listen to the mix.
From the valley low, in the darkest place, yeah, I can't find anyone like you that satisfies quite like you do. And my heart is burning for you.
Well, there you have it, folks. Greatly improve your mixes using the 3 T's approach. So what's the next step in your recording journey? Well, I showed you the main process and some pretty handy tips and tricks, but this is only going to get you so far if it's not backed by a solid knowledge of audio. So I will strongly suggest developing your core knowledge. And it doesn't even have to be by watching my videos. Yeah, sure, I know that you could benefit greatly from the Elite Audio Recording course or even the free version, but the point is that you get this knowledge somehow. Why? Well, because I believe that creative freedom and expression comes from knowledge, not from mimicking somebody else. Mixing according to the latest trends or by what somebody else shows you is no substitute for solid understanding. Well, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video series. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave us a comment or send us an email. We'd be glad to help you out. Thanks for watching.